Shalom Aleichem, welcome to Chabad and Friends. I'd like to talk a little bit about Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, the Rosh Hashiva of Torah Vodaas from 1945 to 1968, and his relationship with Chabad, with Lubavitch. But as a preface, Rabbi Kamenetsky and the Futterfass family, the famous Chassid Rabbi Mendel Futterfass, and his brother, the Hasidic artist Reb Hanoch Lieberman. The name was Futterfass, but was changed to Lieberman, the first Hasidic artist, were actually cousins to the Kamenetskys, to Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky and family. Back from the Tzemach Tzedek's time, I've detailed the history in my book, Rabbi Hutner and Rebbe. For those interested in knowing that piece of history, I would suggest reading that piece there. Rabbi Kamenetsky was raised in Slabodka, meaning he learned, his primary learning was in Slabodka, under the guidance of Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel, known as the Alter of Slabodka, who was a Baal Musar, being a student of the great Musar teachers. And in my conversation with Reb Nosson Kamenetsky, Olav Hasholem, he passed away this year, who was one son of Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, he told me his father was a Misnagid, not a Misnagid in the sense of opposing outwardly Chassidus, but he was indifferent. Chassidus didn't talk to him. And he said that's because Reb Nosson Tzvi Finkel, Chassidus didn't talk to him. His mode of thinking was very much Musar. And again, I wrote at length about that, his shita known as Gadlus Ha'adam, greatness of man, versus in Chabad, the motto was Bittul Ha'adam, subservience of man, the idea of Bittul, in the same book, Rabbi Hutner and Rebbe, because Rabbi Hutner also was a student of Slabodka. But be that as it may, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, was a massive Talmud Chacham. Before coming to Torah Vodaas in 1945, after Reb Shlomo Hyman passed away and Reb Shraga Feivel Mendelovich asked him to come, knowing how great of a Talmud Chacham he was and knowing how good he would be for the Bocharim, for the students. He was a rabbi in Toronto in a shul, and I heard it was a Hasidic shul. And I heard that he would wear a gartel because that was the kind of the minhag over there. And in fact, in Torah Vodaas, I was told during the tefillas he would put on a gartel because Reb Shraga Feivel Mendelovich wanted his staff to wear a gartel during tefillah. So he wasn't the type to be antagonistic, since I'm a Litvak, therefore we don't wear a gartel on top of our jacket, I'm not going to wear a gartel. No. And this sensitivity was proven in the following, and I heard this directly from Rabbi Shane, the famous Mohel ritual circumciser in Crown Heights, who comes from the noted Shane family, who aren't Hasidim, or not all of them are Hasidim, and Rabbi Shane wasn't a Chassid either, but he was living in Crown Heights, because his in-laws, I believe, lived there, and when he married in the 70s, he settled there. He had children, and his children were growing up, and everything around him is Lubavitch, Chabad, because from Orthodox Jewry moved out of Crown Heights in the 60s when the Black Panthers threatened the neighborhood and the sale of the houses, and it was a fiasco. And the only ones that stayed were Lubavitch, were Chabad, because the Rebbe spoke passionately about not leaving. And the Rebbe single-handedly saved that neighborhood. The Bava Hasidim moved to Borough Park, the Satmars to Williamsburg, though although the Satmar had its hub in Williamsburg at that time as well, and they didn't leave, even though they had their issues with Puerto Ricans and others in Williamsburg. But the Chaim Berlin people, the Yeshivas people who were living in Crown Heights, all moved out. So Rabbi Shein had a question for Rabbi Kamenetsky, who he considered his Rosh Hashiva, his Meir Heirah, his Rav. The yeshivas are all Lubavitch. The minig they daven from the Sidurim is the Chabad Nusach Ari. And I'm Ashkenaz. What should I do? So he told me that Rabbi Kamenetsky, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky told him you should follow the minig hamokim, the minig of the community, and you should daven Nusach Ari, and you should send your children to the Chabad institutions. Rabbi Kamenetsky said, he listened, and that's how he and all of his family, his children and everyone else, became Lubavitch Chassidim. Today, some of them are Shluchim of the Rebbe, but Lubavitch Chassidim. Because Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky gave him the halachic ruling, being that he's in this community, he should cooperate and not have any ill feelings that he is a Litvak at the time, and he's davening Nusach Ari, where he should be davening Nusach Ashkenaz, and he's sending his children to the Chabad schools, which is a Chassidish schools, not Litvish schools. And I think that when we think about this, it shows us that the Litoyim, the Litvaks, the Talmidei Chachamim were sensitive people. They weren't troublemakers. They were in very good relations with Hasidim, and the Rebbe attested to this in that famous 1991 clip when he spoke to some Rav who came from Eretz Yisrael, and he asked questions, and the Rebbe told him that, for 100 years, Hasidim and Misnagdim and Litoyim were living in peace, and all of a sudden now, certain troublemakers are making trouble. So this story solidifies this Nekuda, and we should take this as a lesson in our life. And I know that Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky was the Rosh Hashiva of the yeshiva in Philadelphia for years, and still is. I was told by some of his students that he learned Tanya, and he had a Tanya, and he had good relations with Rabbi Avram Shem Tov, the Rebbe's emissary shliach over there. So we see here that although they are Litoyim, Litvaks, nevertheless, there was an admiration and a respect for Chabad Lubavitch.